There we go. All right. Well, welcome everyone to Bills. Let's get ready for Environmental Day at the Capitol. And tonight, that's what we're going to talk about, are bills that you all can lobby on for Environmental Day and other days. I don't expect, nor does anyone expect you to lobby on all of these bills. What you'll want to do as if you're the only one in your team, you'll want to pick you know, a handful, maybe 3 bills, 4 bills to focus on. You can always follow up on some of the others throughout the session. And then as your teams meet, you'll also want to you know, just identify some of the key bills that you want to focus on. We do encourage people to try to do the environmental bills and the democracy bills, but you know, and not as important as it is not to lobby on like education bills for Environmental Day. Definitely supportive of that, but we want to kind of stick to these areas for Environmental Day. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And I want to encourage folks to ask questions as we go along. We're going to keep this a little more casual and hopefully more interactive. So feel free to unmute and ask a question. I may not see your hand because I can only see so many people when I have the screen view. So I would encourage you to unmute and ask a question or put it in the chat and I will get to it at the end.
Sandy, will we get these slides?
Yes. Sorry, turning you up because I couldn't hear you very well. Okay. Yes. Okay. And just as always, wanted to mention that Sierra Club centers our work on principles of equity, justice, and inclusion, including the HEMAS principles for democratic organizing. And we want to keep these principles in mind as we meet this evening and also as we engage in our lobby day and ensuring that we're being inclusive and focusing on bottom-up organizing, and of course, working together in solidarity and mutuality, among other things. All right, so let's start out with some bills. These are a couple of positive climate bills, and while they may not get heard, I think it's important for us to continue to engage with legislators on climate and talk about why they should support these bills and ask them to help get them on an agenda if, especially if they're in the majority. Both bills are sponsored by Democrats, so it makes it tough to get them heard because they mostly don't hear Democratic bills in the legislature. But I still would like to encourage that. And Senate Bill 1434 is a bill to develop a climate resiliency plan and also a planning group. The group would update our statewide greenhouse gas emissions inventory and review and revise recommendations that were made in a climate change action plan from 2006. There were some really good recommendations in there. They do need to be updated, but we thought that would make a good place to start. And then it also requires coordination on climate resiliency planning. And then SCR 1045 is a message, but how wonderful would it be if we could get our legislature to send a message that it supports action by all levels of government to enact policies that'll achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions through a fair and just transition for all communities and workers. So I think it's a really good message. We don't usually do tons on the resolution bills, but I think that is a positive one, and would be great to get that direction from our legislature. So those are a couple of positive climate pieces, and there may be some others that have or will get introduced, and you know, you can you can include these bills as examples if you want of the kinds of things the legislature should be doing. There are a number of other energy bills, energy related bills. These are some of the bad ones, and I highlighted two that I thought that people might want to talk about. The others have not been heard in committee yet. The two highlighted have. They have not passed out of the House yet, so you can still talk about them with both House members and senators, and it is relevant for both. 2101, electric energy reliability policy, public policy, is a bill that deletes all of the language relating to retail competition of electricity. And it also includes some language that we think could interfere with community choice aggregation. And that's when municipalities are buy electricity directly, and generally it's to do so from clean sources. So we have some concerns. There are now some concerns about the bill that it may also affect some ongoing litigation related to rooftop solar, specifically SRP. And so we are currently opposed to this bill. We had looked at if they amended it to address the concerns that perhaps we could move to neutral, but we haven't done that yet. So I think it's an important bill to flag. They didn't do any kind of stakeholder meeting. They did not, they just dropped the bill and then expected everybody to respond to it. So 2536, corporation commissioners qualifications. That is a bill, basically another attack on the Corporation Commission, but specifically seeks to limit who can run for the commission. It requires individuals running to be at least 30 years of age and to have a background in economics, finance, engineering, those areas. Nothing about energy or water or climate science or any of those types of qualifications. So there are definitely current commissioners and commissioners that, or potential commissioners that are running now that would not qualify under this. And we think it is a really maybe not even a backdoor attack on the Corporation Commission. But,
can I add something? Is there a possibility to run a parallel bill that requires the legislature to have had a 12th grade education and a government class, the level of high school mathematics courses, that sort of thing?
yeah,
I'm being a little bit facetious here. Well, no, I'm being real facetious here, but is this retroactive? Are they trying to make this retroactive?
No, it's not retroactive, but it would affect, it could affect some of the
Okay.
people who would run for reelection, because I think it takes effect in 2025. Yeah, 2025.
Oh,
Yeah.
and that is at what status now? That's past committee, you say?
Yes, it passed this week. It passed out of the House Natural Resources, Energy and Water Committee along party lines. The Republicans all voted yes, and the Democrats all voted no. But yes, I brought that up, that we don't require, the only restriction for legislators is age, and also living in their legislative district. And of course, we know some have gotten away with not even living in their legislative district, but there really aren't requirements. And I pointed out to them that they vote on a broad range of really important issues. Not that the commission doesn't have important issues, but the legislature has a broad range of, they don't have to have a background in education, finance, budgeting, environment, water. Anyway, yes, your point is well taken, Mark. And I did try to make that point in my testimony.
I have no doubt, but it's really upsetting, this one particularly,
Yeah,
I guess, so.
yeah.
Well-
And it may have legs because it's Representative Griffin's bill. And she got a similar type of bill through for the state mine inspector. And for that one, she did modify it to meet some of the concerns of the unions, but I still kind of wondered if they were just trying to keep, any activists from ever running for that office. Anyway, the state mine inspector, that is one office that probably should be an appointed office anyway. So we had fewer issues with that, but this is, talking about what is effectively a fourth branch of government that's established in the Constitution. And so we think it's inappropriate.
With that other bill, it's just a real attack on the ACC. I mean, the other one hasn't moved as much forward with the rule making. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm just blowing off steam here. So
Yeah. No problem. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, I see. I have a, oh, the P is white in that. I was like, what happened to that? Anyway, there are a bunch of electric vehicle bills, and I highlighted 3 of them. They're all 3 are Senator Steele's bills, and they have moved out of committee. 2 of them still have to go through appropriations, 1150 and 1151, because they have funding attached to them. Those 2 bills are pilot programs, one for electric vehicle ready homes, and that would provide funding for people to in existing homes to get some help in retrofitting for EVs, putting in a charger, and then an outlet. And then it also requires that future construction be EV ready. 1151 is for charging stations in public buildings, at public buildings, state agencies, and it allows those agencies to apply for funding to cover the costs. And 1152 is a bill to require coordination among 3 agencies: ADOT, the Arizona Department of Transportation, Arizona Department of Administration, and Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, to develop a zero emissions vehicle plan to help increase the number of zero emission vehicles and coordinate on infrastructure for it. So those three I highlighted. 1154 also is out of committee. It's a study committee and it's fine. It just, doesn't do quite as much. So I didn't have that one highlighted. Senator Steele will be speaking at Environmental Day just briefly for about 10 minutes, and we'll be talking about some of these bills. And then there are several bills for to help promote electric school buses. Senator Boyer has one that will expedite acquisition of EV buses by schools. That one I think is going to be up next week, and they are making some amendments. So I think that's on the agenda, the education agenda for in the Senate. So I'll be sending that out in the environmental updates. So I should have highlighted that one too, because it is scheduled. And then the other bills include appropriations for electric school buses and some other provisions. So, and of course we know transportation is a huge greenhouse gas emitter, and that is one of the reasons why we want to move toward electrification of our transportation. Another bill related to energy, but also related to waste and protecting our water and health is House Bill 2411. And this bill allows or authorizes the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality to assume the coal ash program under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. And coal ash is what you get when you burn coal. And there are these impoundments, sometimes ponds, basically, that contain this coal ash. And you've probably heard of some of the problems that have happened out east where they've had, flooding, and these ponds have contaminated water and affected people's wells and other things. The Arizona Department of Environmental Quality wants to pursue this program at a time when, for the first time, really, EPA is actually implementing and enforcing the program. We're concerned that ADEQ wants this program to do less versus doing more with it, as they've claimed. And we also know the agency is very cozy with the utilities. So we are opposing, we're opposing this bill. It did pass out of the House. So it just passed out yesterday, and it was along party lines. So in lobbying on this one, you would want to focus more on senators. If you wanted to mention it to House members, if your House member is a Democrat, you could thank them. If they're a Republican, then, or your House members, if they're Republicans, then you could say you're disappointed in their vote and tell them why. All right, let's talk a little bit about a few water bills. Just mentioning again, the governor is proposing funding for desalination. We expect that to show up in the budget. So I just wanted to highlight that. This is to desalinate water down in the Sea of Cortez, and then have that would be available for use in Mexico, and then there more of the water that would normally go to Mexico would be diverted here via the Central Arizona project.
Is there
And-
excuse me,
Go ahead.
is there a written plan for this desalinization idea? Is it documented anywhere? Do we know who's doing the desalination system? Anything about, $1 billion? Where's this $1 billion coming from? The feds? Is there any
No.
documentation?
It's the proposal is to have the funding come from Arizona, and it's over like 3 years. And no, there's very little documentation at this point. It's what the governor threw out in his state of the state address, which was very little. So there's,
Right.
at this point, there's not much. There may be more later.
But they're not saying.
Yeah, that they're not to us. And the water processes have tended to be pretty exclusive. They'll do public meetings where they talk more generally about things, and then behind closed doors they do all the negotiations and putting together of harmful proposals. So but I think if people want to talk about desalination at all, I think some of the things that you can raise with your legislators are, it's very expensive. It uses a lot of electricity, and there is a byproduct, brine, and that can be very harmful as well. If they're going to do it in the Sea of Cortez, or what kind of impact might it have there? I don't know. So those are all things to think about. And couldn't we first do more relative to conservation? There's so much more we could do to conserve water before going down that road. So
Because I've seen pro forma for those systems, and they're massive, and the electricity consumption is huge. It's just a whole other challenge to the electrical grid here in the electrical system, that we'd have to pick up. I was just curious. I had heard of some down in the Sea of Cortez, but that's kind of a volatile thermo area. I mean, still part of the ring of fire, isn't it? I mean, the threat to volcanic activity, earthquakes down there is an amazing challenge. $1 billion seems kind of light to me, but I'm going to do a little research on that, because we need to know.
yeah,
transparency. So
it's not unlike the proposal that they approved the resolution on last year to pipe water from the Mississippi. So always good to ask these questions, and we know that they can put a lot of money into things that either aren't very realistic or will end up causing great harm. So we definitely want to monitor it. Some other bills, 2055 Harquahala non-expansion area. This bill allows private water companies to pump groundwater out in the Harquahala Valley and import it into the active management areas. It's being pushed primarily by EPCOR, which is a private water company, a fairly big private water company, but also supported by the Home Builders Association of Central Arizona, and then Harquahala Valley Coalition, which I believe is perhaps some landowners out there. And they this bill sailed out of the House Natural Resources, Energy and Water Committee, but then its companion bill stalled out in the Senate because the Democrats raised objections, and also Senator Rick Gray was concerned about how it would impact water rates, that because EPCOR serves Sun City area where that he represents. So for us, this is, basically creates, or it furthers this whole idea of having these groundwater pumping sacrifice zones. And then it also gives private water companies the opportunity to control more of our water. We think both of those are bad ideas. And so that's why we're opposing 2055.
Sandy, question on that is, what's the particular active management area that is interested in this? Or
The Pinal.
Yeah, okay. That's what I figured, but I thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Queen Creek, I think specifically is interested in this. They signed in support of it, so.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
2466 is a good bill, a good consumer protection bill, and just requires that subdivisions, any subdivision built in the state has to have an adequate water supply. Currently, they don't, and if there is inadequate water, they only have to tell the first time home buyer. So there's also a disclosure bill, which I didn't put on here. These are Democratic bills, but a bill that would require, if there's inadequate water, that they would have to tell subsequent home buyers that there was inadequate water for the housing development. But
Sandy, are they articulating levels, specific levels and amounts on this, or leaving it awfully vague in terms of the limitations and so on?
No, the adequate water supply is defined in statute, and just like assured water supply. So there are specifics in current statute. So it would just basically, instead of saying you could go ahead with a subdivision when there's inadequate water, you could no longer do that. And then, and I'm not saying that that's enough, by the way, but it would be an improvement, and it especially would be an improvement for consumers. 26.
Sorry to interrupt here again. In statute, your sense is those levels are incorrect? Your feeling is that those levels are incorrect as they're stated in statute?
I didn't say that. I said, I'm not saying that doing this alone is adequate to address the water issues outside the active management areas, because even the requirements for assured water supply inside of active management areas is not enough. And we have a lot of loopholes, and that, for example, I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this, but the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, people, developers can join that, and then they have an assured water supply, and they can pump groundwater in a particular area, and then, you know, water is recharged with CAP water, but it's usually in a totally different area. And so you can have significant impacts in a particular area, and really you don't have, in a lot of ways, an assured water supply. So anyway, I'm just saying that that is not enough, clearly. If you look at, we're still pumping more groundwater in most of the active management areas than is being recharged. And so that that it's clearly not strong enough.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. And then 2661 is a bill that allows counties outside of active management areas to establish rural management areas, and these are areas that would be set up for limiting groundwater pumping. The bill sets up a process for establishing them. It also includes a funding source they are calling the Arizona Water Heritage Fund. And so it would take money from the lottery for supporting these rural management areas. This bill just got introduced. There was a previous version of it, and so I haven't looked at this very carefully, so I don't know if it is. I'm guessing it's not as strong as we would like, but it is perhaps a step in the right direction, because as we know, right now, anything goes with groundwater pumping outside of active management areas. And we're seeing a lot of people have their wells dried up, and you know, we see land subsidence and earth fissures associated with all that groundwater pumping. So we definitely need something in place to begin to get a handle on the groundwater pumping outside those active management areas. And then on surface water, I hope I'm not running too long. I'm just checking my, okay, doing all right. On surface water, this is a bill that a coalition of groups has been working on for several years. It's Senate Bill 1480. And it basically is a way to help leave more water in rivers and streams. It defines ecological water, water sufficient to sustain freshwater ecosystems, wildlife habitat, and human livelihoods, and well-being that depend on these ecosystems. So a pretty good definition. It's based on a definition that the U.S. Geological Service uses. And then recognizing watershed health as a beneficial use of surface water. In Arizona, we have this weird system where we treat ground and surface water differently, and most of the time quite separately. For surface water, people actually have water rights, and the first people to take the water from a river or stream and put that water to beneficial use, they have the highest priority use for it. And as you know, people who came later and did that, they will have a lower priority use. But to generally to keep the water rights, they have to put them to beneficial use, which usually means, you know, some kind of agricultural or industrial those types of uses. And so what this says is you could just say, I want that water to stay in the river for the sake of the river. And that would be considered a beneficial use and you wouldn't lose your water right. So, and then it also requires the Department of Water Resources to assess our surface waters in order to, determine where the needs are. This bill will have a tough time getting heard, but one of the things, if you're so inclined, you could ask in the Senate, especially because that's where it's been introduced, for your senators to request that this bill be heard and to support it. So.
Sandy, has the language changed from last year?
No, it's the same as last year.
Same as last year, okay.
Yeah, we modified it after the first couple of times based on some concerns that the Department of Water Resources raised and just some cleanup and clarifications, but this year's bill is exactly the same as last year's.
Last year, okay.
And Senator Stahl Hamilton is the one that is sponsoring that bill. There are, oops, I've noticed I blended the two border bills together, but that's all right. There are several bad border wall bills and resolutions. One appropriates $150 million to build border wall. I don't know where they're going to build it because they can't build it on federal public lands, but that doesn't stop them. I think, to be honest with you, I think these bills are more geared toward election, trying to have something divisive and nasty to talk about in their election bids. I don't know, but anyway, they are looking at appropriating some dollars, and then they have a resolution asking for construction materials that weren't used because, the Biden administration halted most of the border wall construction, not all of it, to be sent to the states for constructing border wall. So obviously a bad idea as well. And then a couple of other resolutions. HCR 2024 is a resolution opposing the 30 by 30 program that it's a Biden administration proposal to protect 30% of the US waters and lands. This is something that scientists have said is critical for us to address the climate crisis, and obviously important to help address the extinction crisis relative to plants and animals as well. And this bill basically opposes every kind of additional protection and anything that protects lands from development. So it did pass out of the House yesterday, again, along party lines. And so it will go to the Senate. And then SCR 1010, I think this actually, I know the resolution passed in the House, and I didn't have a chance to look at it. It may have already passed in the Senate, but it's kind of a feel-good resolution about recognizing the importance of outdoors and equal access to nature. So like Roz, I know you might be meeting with Senator Shope. I know he's your senator anyway. It might be one thing that you could actually thank him for. So
thanks, I need something.
yeah, it's always good to, just a tip. I don't know if I mentioned this when we were talking about lobby tips, but I always think if there's something positive, you can thank them for first, and then get to the other stuff where maybe they are not so good. That always is a good way to start a meeting. So even if it may seem small. All right, and then State Parks Heritage Fund. Last year, State Parks Heritage Fund did get funded for 10 million, but that came out of, some of it was actually some federal dollars and then general fund dollars. And this bill appropriates 3 million from the lottery fund, from the lottery for the fund, and it's a continuous appropriation. We would like to see that get bumped up to 10 million. That's what the voters approved in 1990 for this fund. And the State Parks Heritage Fund helps to fund local, regional, as well as state parks. It helps with historic preservation. It invests in trails, and those are non-motorized trails. And there's also funding for environmental ed. The historic preservation dollars can help protect cultural resources, and that, is a really important provision. So we would like to see at a minimum this pass, but also to bump up that amount if possible. And this was just heard in Senate Appropriations the other day, so it is appropriate to talk about it in either house. So with senators and reps. And then there are so many I should call them anti-democracy and anti-voting rights bills that I couldn't possibly list all of them, nor can I totally predict which ones they will move. One of the things that Emily Kirkland with Progress Arizona recommended yesterday is to kind of lump them into categories and not worry as much about the exact bill numbers. You can always follow up with that if you need to. We will have a handout with some bill numbers, however, and just kind of, generally the bills are to prohibit or impede early voting or mail-in voting, requiring additional ID, including for those who are only voting federal ballots, and doing things like making it more difficult for the counties to administer the elections, requiring them to have certain types of paper with holograms and things like that, that wouldn't necessarily be easy to get. And there might only be one vendor that has those available. So a couple of these bills to prohibit drop boxes have already advanced in committee. None of these have passed out of either house. 2596, which is one of the worst bills, a bill introduced by John Fillmore, outlaws mail-in voting, restricts early voting, requires that people rather than machines count the ballots, and allows the legislature to approve or reject election results. There are many issues with this bill. The good news, I guess, is, it's sad that it was introduced, but the good news is that bill has been assigned to 11 committees. So the Speaker of the House has made it clear that he does not want that bill to advance. So that's not one I think we necessarily need to worry about, but it's an example of just how far they're going. And also, I think there are.
the legislature has to approve it, why vote? If that's the problem, if they
Well-
can just turn it over or something.
There you
Yeah.
have it. Seems like there would be some constitutional issues with that, but
Yeah,
yeah. Fillmore, Representative Fillmore actually said he wanted this to get things back to 1958 style voting. Which for those of you who are, remember when the Voting Rights Act passed, that was not in 1958. It was, I think it was 64. So anyway, it was well past 1958. So you can kind of see where he's coming from. And perhaps some of the populations that they're targeting. I mean, we know that a number of these measures will have a disproportionate negative impact on some rural voters, particularly tribal people who are part of tribal nations, more impact on people of color, and so overall, and so, we're very concerned about, well, both the intentions and the impacts of some of these bills. And then also in the democracy arena, they are looking to make it more difficult, even more difficult, to either put ballot measures on the ballot or to get them passed. Representative Dunn has a bill to require a super majority, 60% approval of any ballot measure before it would become law. A relatively high bar. A lot of ballot measures pass, with like 55%. So not a good idea. You go through all of that time, expense, and you get 59% and it doesn't become law. That would be heartbreaking. And then also there are two bills, companion bills, that would require, in trying to put something on the ballot, that you would have to have a proportionate number of signatures from each legislative district. So for a statutory measure, you have to gather 10% of the number of people who voted in the last gubernatorial election. And so you would have to get 10% proportionately in each legislative district. That's a really challenging thing to do. And it requires it not just of statutory initiatives, but of referenda as well. And if you're doing a referendum, you only have 90 days from when the legislature adjourns to gather the signatures. So it would be hugely challenging for a referendum. And then SB 1094 basically says that you have to listen to or read the description, and the petition circulator has to assert that you took the time to actually read it. And if they think that you didn't, they have to cross out your signature. So that is a really bad idea. Not everyone needs to read the 100-word description. Some people may have actually read the entire initiative. They may, and be ready to sign. I do that. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with this. I will sign that. I don't need to have it read to me. I don't need to read it. I know. The other thing I would say is, by signing someone's petition, you are not saying that you're going to vote for a particular measure. All you're saying is, yeah, I think this is something that the people should have an opportunity to vote on. So trying to erect these kinds of impediments is pretty unconscionable. All right, those were the main bills that I had to go over tonight. I guess I will mention one last bill that I just found out was going to be on an agenda next week, and I really hadn't had a chance to look at it, but just was looking at it a little while before we got together, and it's House Bill 2674, municipal zoning by right housing. It's co-sponsored by Kaiser and Chavez. And in theory, it's supposed to be a bill to promote affordable housing. But advocates for affordable housing are actually not supporting it because it preempts local zoning. It really makes cities' general plans meaningless. And it would basically require, it would undercut energy conservation measures and energy conservation codes at the local level as well. So I'll have more on that in the legislative update as soon as I finish that sometime late this evening. But just wanted to give you a heads up on that. It's House Bill 2674, and it will be up the day before Environmental Day in the Commerce Committee. All right, other questions that folks have?
Yeah, I have a question, Sandy. If we sign up for some of these bills, is someone going to get in touch with us or something? I don't know what's going on exactly. Will we be speaking with someone, or I know you said only a few people will be going inside the legislature, so.
Oh, yeah. What district are you in, Richard?
24.
Oh, yeah. Alex Ross should have been in touch with you about getting together to talk about your meeting with, there's a meeting scheduled with Senator Alston and with Rep. Longden.
I saw Rep. Longden this morning.
Did
It's
you? Well,
interesting. Yeah, I just accidentally saw her. She came to where we were volunteering at. She did some volunteer work.
did you get a message from Alex Ross?
No.
Alex, oh, Alex is on there. Alex.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just about to send out a little reminder this evening after this meeting to get ready for next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're all kind of scrambling, Richard, but you should have gotten that initial message, and then Alex will get something set up so you all can talk. And Alex, I'll forward you. I got confirmation from Barbara again about that meeting, so I will forward that to you.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? Let's see. Paula, can you ask your question? I don't know what you're asking. I'm misunderstanding it. So you want to unmute?
It's not so much a question as just a note that the Progress Arizona categories that you mentioned for those, I was going to say bad voting bills, but that's kind of redundant this year. For the voting bills, it is very useful. I think if people can get to that on the Progress Arizona website, they might find that a useful way to think about the voting bills and to talk about them. That was a good set of categories.
Yeah, for sure. Let me see if I can share that in the chat right now. Oh, it's not. Why aren't you letting me? There we go. Because I just was looking at that. Where is it? Thought I had it open. Oh yeah, here we go. It's a voting 2022 voting rights defense toolkit. So let me put that in there right now so everybody has it. And I think I'm going to send that out this weekend I'll send like kind of the last message with the packet of materials and a final, well, pretty close to final agenda for your group. There are always last minute changes. And I think I'll include that that link in there too, because it is helpful. I agree. And that's the that's actually a voting rights coalition has put that together, and Progress Arizona is part of the voting rights coalition, as are we. So, and a bunch of other groups. Other questions? Do people was that helpful? Do you feel a little bit more ready? Yeah, and don't worry about knowing everything about everything. None of us do. We so I always encourage people to talk about what you're most passionate about too. So, because that comes through, you know, when you're talking to your legislators. So hopefully that will be helpful, and you'll get a few more tips on Environmental Day too. We'll probably have a few other issues, and then, like I said, Senator Steele will be talking about the EV bills. So, all right. Well, thanks so much for spending a little bit of your Friday evening with me, and hopefully you'll have a great rest of your evening and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Sandy.
Bye, everyone.